Hi, my name is Elaine Simpson and I have worked with all types of government publications in the National Library of Scotland for many years. I know that when looking for a parliamentary paper, whether it is House of Commons, House of Lords paper, a command, or even a quote from Hansard, it can seem to be quite a daunting task. Where do you start to find all the relevant information? A good way to explain how to find parliamentary papers is to use an example. And with this in mind, I thought I would use one of my interests, which is close to my heart. It is the suffragette movement. I was asked earlier why I am so passionate about this subject. I suppose it starts with the courage and conviction that someone is willing enough to stand up and demand justice, in this case, vote for women. Would I have taken it on? Would I have been so strong in my belief that in the worst case scenario, I would have risked imprisonment and even go on a hunger strike? I've never been tested in this as yet, and I hope that I would be strong enough to have the courage to stand up for a cause that's very important to me. Another reason is one of my relatives was involved in the suffragette movement. In fact, the brooch that I'm wearing came from my grandmother. The colours green, white and violet, saying, "Give women the vote." I have read many books written on the subject, but I wanted to know what Parliament had to say on the matter. Not to read the historian's point of view, but to read what was actually being said at that time. So how do I find the relevant information? For example, how many bills and reports were produced? And were there many discussions taking place in Parliament about this issue? For the discussions, I would always look at Hansard, which is an edited verbatim report of proceedings of both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. All parliamentary papers are listed in the printed indexes to parliamentary papers. These indexes are kept in the reference service area in the reading rooms in George IV Bridge. Anyone can consult them. A word of advice: if you can't find what you're looking for in the index, don't give up. Try another search term or ask at the inquiry desk. Once you've started looking in the printed index, there's so much you can find. For example, there is a host of bills about women's franchise that started and failed to be passed as acts. I also knew about the Cat and Mouse Act of 1913. This was to provide for the temporary discharge of prisoners whose further detention in prison is undesirable on account of the condition of their health. It was used on suffragettes. When arrested, they could go on a hunger strike. When they were weak, they would be released on licence. However, once they started eating and were fit again, they would be rearrested and put back in prison to continue their sentence. This stopped the need to force feed the prisoner. All these items you can request using the session year and the volume number, then read them in the reading room. As I looked through Hansard, there was a lot of speeches about this subject, and found this paragraph about forcible feeding when the MPs were discussing the Cat and Mouse Bill in Hansard. It was on Wednesday the 2nd April 1913, and in volume number 51, this described the force feeding aspect. Sometimes the tube had to be pushed up the nostrils 3 to 5 times before a passage could be forced. In several cases, bleeding continued for some days. In one case, it recurred for 10 days. And the other quote from the same volume: "But I personally say that if women are determined to starve, you cannot help them. I think that forcible feeding is disgusting and degrading. It is really torture. But if these women are determined to commit suicide, it seems to me impossible to prevent them doing so. You are quite likely to kill them by forcible feeding as by allowing them to starve." I find that Hansard to be so very enlightening in capturing what the MPs felt at that time, how they really thought about the subject. There is another way of looking for these items. The NLS subscribes to the ProQuest Chadwick-Healy House of Commons Parliamentary Papers database, HCPP for short. And if you're a registered reader and live in Scotland, you can use this through the licensed digital resources on your webpage. This is a full-text digital archive of the 19th and 20th century House of Commons Parliamentary Papers 1801 to the 2003-04 session. This is a brief introduction about finding older parliamentary papers, using an example, the suffragette movement. I find all parliamentary papers fascinating. Every day you never know what's actually going to hit your desk, and for a long time I get very excited about the items that actually are on TV, and the next day they come onto my desk, which is fantastic fun to see them. We need to keep them. It's history, and it's history as it happens. It's not a historian's view about it.